Hi there. Welcome back to the Real Film Chronicles. As always, I'm Nathan.
And I'm Brian.
And today, we're going to be talking about a little film called Space Sweepers.
A South Korean 2021 sci-fi epic on Netflix of all things, which this movie felt like it belonged on the big screen. So I'm not sure the production history. I was reading that it was filmed in 2019. The COVID pandemic basically kept putting it further away to the point where Netflix just throws it online in late 2021. And here we are watching this film. It's pretty wild. You brought this movie forward here. We were looking for a movie to watch. And I was feeling sci-fi, so I was browsing through some of the Netflix sci-fi stuff. And you put forward Space Sweepers. How did you land on this movie? Like, you had an awareness of this beforehand, right?
I was aware of it partially because of Netflix's advertising. When you go on there, it was advertising this for a while, and then caught my eyes. Like, the visuals looked really good, really interesting. This little snippet of the story, the advertising actually worked in this case. And then I just read a little bit online about it, and I was curious about it, and I've been wanting to watch this for the past couple months, and I figured this is a good excuse as any to throw this up on the podcast, and here we are.
When the crew of a space junk collector ship called the Victory discovers a humanoid robot named Dorothy that's known to be a weapon of mass destruction, they get involved in a risky business deal, which puts their lives at stake. If you had 60 seconds to talk about the overall plot of this movie, how would you approach describing this movie to listeners?
This is essentially the South Korean version of Firefly and or Cowboy Bebop. It's a renegade crew of misfits trying to make a living, and they get caught up in a larger adventure. And it's essentially, these kind of misfits / outcasts who kind of with a heart of gold. And then the fate of the world comes down to these apparently kind of selfish people who end up saving the day.
The four crew members of the Victory are literal space sweepers. Like, this is in the year 2092, where a lot of humanity has gone into space. There's multiple space stations surrounding Earth. There's a lot of problems with space debris, which we hear about in today's news, but going forward 100 years in the future, there's going to be significant more. And there's a whole career here where the space sweepers are literally sweeping space. They go around and kind of compete to pick up different scrap and sell it back to the company. The four members are Kim Tae-ho, Tiger Park, Bubs, and Captain Jang. And Bubs is a robot, an android, right?
Yes.
And so the whole thing is that they find like a spaceship that's kind of like derelict. It's space junk. They harpoon this thing, they get it, and they find a little girl on board who they believe is another android who is used as a bomb, because there's news in this world where
the Black Foxes,
these little girl androids, the Black Fox terrorist organization, are using these little girl androids to basically put a bomb into public spaces, and then the little girls blow up.
Not just any bomb, it's a hydrogen bomb.
Well, I don't think the little girls are hydrogen bombs.
They said that there was
the main bomb.
They said that there was
at the end.
They said that the android, that was the propaganda they put out, that this little girl was housing a miniature hydrogen bomb that they were going to use for terrorist related activities.
I can understand like a miniature bomb, because these little girls, they're kind of small, right? And the big bomb throughout the later on in the movie is gigantic and really gnarly.
Not as gigantic as we thought, because they fit it in the hold of their spaceship at the end.
Well, they got a big ship, yeah.
Like, it's about the size of the bomb in The Dark Knight Rises, right? It's like you could fit that in the back of a pickup truck, I think. Not a pickup truck, but like a tractor trailer, I should say.
Yeah, a tractor trailer size H-bomb is pretty big. It's significantly bigger than a bomb you put into a 6-year-old child, I guess. In any event, this movie was ridiculous. Like, is it safe to say we'll just talk about spoilers right from the beginning here?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think it's not one of those movies that really relies on a big twist or anything. It's more about kind of really smartly. It's about these character moments. And I was really pleasantly surprised at there was some real depth to some of these characters. Because on the surface level, it's like this kind of, fun, goofy action adventure. But then there's like these really kind of really serious, really poignant moments for some of the characters.
There were like our main character there, is kind of trying to find his deceased daughter, right?
Adopted daughter, yeah.
His adopted daughter. So he was a child soldier. And I think when he was a teenager, he's basically going in and they're just killing non-citizens. And in this world, there are citizens and non-citizens, and the non-citizens they're just living in poverty constantly. Well, let's reverse a little bit here. The earth is decimated and highly polluted, right?
There's a little bit of environmental, not a little bit, a lot of environmental subtext going on here, where the earth is polluted to the point where people have to literally wear masks to go outside. It's just it's a barren wasteland. And then you have this corporation, UTS Corporation, which is like, at some point did it flash on the screen? It was like above the sky is literally what UTS stood for.
Probably. I wouldn't be surprised.
But it's like literally like, yeah. So like, it was very like much like the movie Elysium, where like the rich people essentially escaped and they were in space stations. And then the CEO of UTS had actually undertaken a project to terraform Mars so that it was habitable, and essentially like all the rich people, or the people of quality that he thought were worth saving, are going to be eventually mass emigrated to Mars to start his new, corporate utopian society.
Yeah, they're trying to terraform Mars right now.
Oh, it's fully terraformed. Like it is ready to go.
But they're they're trying to get people over there and essentially trying to get rid of Earth for their corporate
obvious
interests.
Environmental commentary, obvious allegory of different the conflict between different social classes. That was all kind of really built in, and it was a little bit it was kind of bluntly done in some places, but it wasn't beating it over the head, I guess.
No.
It wasn't like maybe as blunt as Elysium, but maybe not as nuanced as insert nuanced movie here.
Like anything else, basically. So our main character, I think Kim, right? He's lost his adopted daughter because he's living in one of these space stations. Tahoe. Yeah. And a piece of space debris hits the space station and kind of like blows a chunk off of it. And the girl is unfortunately in the area, and she's sucked out into space, essentially, right? Like that's like there's no question she didn't survive, but this guy is trying to save up enough money to go to this organization that actually recovers bodies from space. And it's kind of dark that, there's a whole system in place for recovering bodies. And they're like, oh, you have about, I think it was like 3 years typically to find people before they, what's the term they used?
Well, they were still like in orbit, I guess, before
they're still in orbit. Yeah. Before they're unrecoverable, which I think just means they start burning up in the atmosphere. So he has to save up enough money. And because he's no longer a citizen, they don't take credit or anything. He has to pay with cash.
$190,000 up front.
$190,000. Yeah. Which is brutal. So that's his motivation throughout the entire movie, is he's just trying to get money and get his daughter.
Well, yeah. So like, that's the things like Tahoe was, Kim Tahoe was, he sets up as this almost like very kind of pathetic character, very kind of goofy, where he's going to the local law enforcement and he's literally selling the shoes off his feet just to get access to the morgue to take a look at this body that was recovered of a young girl. And you don't kind of know why.
He has to pay money just for that.
Yeah, he's like trading rice, like real rice. Apparently there's, it goes into this commentary about, it's like, there's like such a food shortage. I guess they're having to have synthetic foods and stuff made. He's kind of a goofy kind of character, but then you go into the backstory. I think Bubs, the android, is relating this to the little girl they find, about how he started off as like a child soldier who was part of the military, and like those awesome, not awesome because they're a bunch of murderers, but they have like the cybernetic suits that they're wearing, which are really well done. Is what I meant to say, is like, because they were all CG obviously, but they were like.
Can I make a comment on these awesome suits? Yeah. And mention another Neil Blomkamp movie of Chappie and how they look exactly like a Chappie robot. Yeah, so this is two different like inspirations from other sci-fi.
Yeah,
because they have like the LCD like screen for a face, right? Which is, and they had the the antenna ears, but they were all sort of pulled back in this movie.
Yeah,
but it's like you could clearly see. It's like if those things went up, we might get a little bit of a lawsuit on our hands here for some copyright.
Oh yeah, for sure. But like, but Tahoe is like, he was a child soldier. He killed this young girl's parents, but for some reason he rescued her. And that essentially because he was getting that human empathy, with, making that emotional connection with his daughter, he couldn't do his job as an enforcer for this company. Yeah. Essentially, like the company's kind of taken over the government, it seems like, or taken over for the government.
Yeah.
He couldn't he couldn't kill dissidents anymore, and so he wasn't effective at his job. So he got fired. He got let go. He and his adopted daughter were living in the streets in utter poverty. He gets addicted to gambling to try and, as a desperate way to try and make money. And the last interaction is like his adopted daughter is trying to show him some, something she wrote about him, about how much she loved him and how she wanted to be a good person like her daddy. And he's just like, here, take this. Daddy's gambling. Take this money and go buy some food, and I'll talk to you later. And that's when she gets hit. So it's like this really dark backstory, and it's like really neat how they have these characters up front, and then they start talking about it. Like Tiger Park was. At some point, he was like the head of a drug cartel.
Yeah, which
he was like he would chop off people's hands and stuff.
Well, it's interesting because some of those, like the other crew members, sort of get like these. I don't want to say flashback things. They're sort of on the run, and the propaganda is putting like wanted posters type of thing out on the news networks, and they give a little bit of backstory on some of the other crew members there. And yeah, Tiger Park was like a drug baron, and it was just like, whoa. They sort of like flash back and like show a couple scenes there, and you're like, oh my goodness, this guy is pretty hardcore, right? And I think what was Captain Jang? What was she in the before she became a space sweeper? All I remember is that she tried to assassinate the CEO.
Yeah, I think she was an idealistic. She was an idealist. I don't know if she was part of the Black Foxes, but she was part of an idealistic kind of freedom fighter organization who was fighting back.
Oh, I'm just reading that she was an inventor that sold some stuff to the UTS. She's a child genius.
Yeah, because she invented all the weapon and everything she had, that kind of component gun that she added onto. But so I don't know if she was part of a freedom fighter group or whether she just saw that UTS was kind of was a corrupt organization and corrupting her technology. But she did try to kill the CEO of UTS,
James Sullivan.
I was really surprised. I thought the whole thing was going to be in Korean, but it was like really a multinational where you had like...
It was very multicultural, and it was like sort of that advanced, like obviously the future of the society where everybody is speaking their own native language, right? And it's like I'm picking up on some French here and there and other languages, and there's just subtitles whenever you need them. I thought that was a really neat thing. The dominant language seemed to be English because that's what the corporation, who obviously rules over all these people, were speaking. But yeah, that was a neat point about the film.
Yeah, it was really neat how not really neat. The storytelling was really well done about how these characters, like, introduced these characters kind of really quick, gave a really, really good idea of like the world they were in, their place in the world, and like they were this kind of embattled crew who was just trying to make a buck, really like salvaging space garbage and selling it back for like pennies on the dollar for what it was worth.
I mean, that whole first sequence there was like the big first action set piece where they're chasing down this piece of space junk, which has got like a small spaceship, and they're competing with other space sweepers, and you sort of get to know a little bit of them. And I think near the very end, it's like they're bouncing off of like this this force field that's containing one of the space cities, and they end up taking an antenna off one of these towers.
Yeah,
and it's just like when they go in to sell their space junk, they're getting money for that, but they also have a huge fine to pay for breaking that antenna, and basically all their money is just like instantly gone. And there's so many rules and regulations that even these people who are working out in space so hard to get any kind of scrap, like literally scraps, are just being fined and caught up in all these regulations where there's no money coming their way.
Yeah, but like I think the movie does a really good job of, diving right in, kind of in media res almost, into the story, really succinct kind of world building, and then later on it kind of dives into each of the characters' backstories and gives them a little more depth. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, that's really neat. It's like, so that's why this character is like this. And that's why these characters are interacting in this specific way. Yeah. It's like, it kind of almost like peeling back layers. It was like, the storytelling was really well done, I think.
We got to talk about the special effects in this movie and how the movie looked. Cause it is a looker. Like You sent a message after watching this movie that this film had a budget of $21 million, like US dollars.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, I just do not believe it, because this movie, the special effects, like the CGI, there's a ton of space stuff. Almost every single scene has something going on in it. Like every single scene has a special effect going on, and it looks pretty incredible. Like I can't really knock it.
I would put it up there with like any 200 million blockbuster or $200 million blockbuster that's been released in the past 5 years. I would put Space Sweepers up there with the best of them, and it would hold its own. There's a couple places where you kind of see the seams a little bit, but like overall, like the whole, like Bubs, the android, is like, that was amazing. Like
the animation on that thing, like maybe the animation on the robot was incredible. It's just its mannerisms, obviously some kind of motion capture, but it looked seamless with the rest of the scene and the actors. It just looked incredible.
I always love seeing what different directors and different movies will do in terms of the designs of like androids and stuff.
Yeah. And
I'm always like, well, how can they do something different, and how can they do something unique? And it was really neat with this one, where it had like, for the facial expressions, it had almost like the LED, like a set number of LED expressions. There was like, sometimes it would be a smile, or sometimes it would be like a frown.
When they start talking about money, there's a couple dollar signs thrown onto the face.
It's like these little emojis essentially.
They're using
exactly
the emojis.
That's really neat. And just like the whole Bubs had a backstory where he, or I guess it turns out she in the end, he had like kind of almost like very male voice, but when at the end, spoilers, when she gets her skin grafts on, and it turns out that she's a woman.
Yeah, she's been trying to get money this whole time to get a skin graft to basically appear human. And at the end, that was really interesting.
Where she's actually trying to choose a new voice, because like she's like, my voice doesn't really match me. So she's going through trying to choose a new voice, and then like the little kid is like, well, I like your voice. Well, I wonder too if that's looking at today's context, if because we both read that android, I think, as male, right?
Yes.
And it ends up getting like a female skin graft. And I was like, I'm wondering if that read is supposed to be almost like a transgender in a transgender context, right?
Well, definitely. And it's a thing where, to be fair, I did read this online somewhere. It's just there's some commentary here on trans healthcare and transitioning under like a capitalist society like this, where there's no support for it. Right. And it's like, that's obviously a very hot topic right now in our world.
Yeah.
And here it is in this movie, represented, I thought, pretty well. It was pretty interesting. I didn't really pick up on that until the very end. And it was a nice character arc for this robot who you just think is just a robot, right? But it's like, no, these robots are treated like people, like from their peers and everything. But the overarching, like the capitalists, the organizations, they don't care about anybody.
Yeah, well,
so nobody's getting.
It was a nice little hint there when Bubs was doing the makeup on the little girl, and I was like, oh, there's like this edge of femininity to the robot that I hadn't picked up on before. And then at the end, she gets the skin graft where she ends up being female. I was like, oh, that's really neat. But yeah, that was this little subtle things like that, like very kind of modern context and commentary that. For all the talk and bigger studio films like, Disney, where they try to do like inclusion in LGBTQ, and this little movie from South Korea that I haven't seen a whole lot of dialogue online, but they're doing LGBTQ content better than these big studios.
Yeah. Like that little story, those little story beats and that ending for Bubs, the android, would not happen in a lot of Western films. And those beats should be there, because it's just so nice to give every single character something to grasp onto that's potent and relevant.
Yeah, and as I said, even what's his name there, Tiger Park, Tiger Park. Yeah, and it's like it's this crazy backstory where he seems like he's kind of like a kind of rough exterior. You can see like there's a streak of violence in him, and he keeps talking about, like I think Bubs asked him at one point, is like about the hand thing where he'd chop off the hands and he would keep one and give the other one like to the
so gnarly
as a warrior. And like Bubs is like, no, you didn't. It's like, come on. He was like, yeah, I did. And then at the end when like that whole fight at the end where that it's like, I think it's like an android or cyborg lady comes in and just like destroys them.
Yeah.
It's such a brutal fight. And at the end, when he's victorious, again, spoilers, but he like locks himself in that room, and eventually she's like just laying into him too. And he has the upper hand exactly 0 times in that fight until the very end. And he comes back and he tosses the severed hand to Bubs. And Bubs is like, and the android even is just like, the android is like, used to be a military android, used to be like, she talked about how she used to be an assassin and all this stuff. And then she takes the hands like, it's still warm, and she drops it. It's like, this is gross. It's like, didn't believe it. It was like, oh yeah, like Tiger Park is he has a really dark background to the point where like, because of his running that drug cartel, which I guess he gave up. I can't remember why he gave it up, but like he's one on Earth to the point where like if he steps foot on Earth, he's going to be like executed immediately by the authorities.
What did you think of this future world that they've created where like plant life doesn't grow on Earth? I get the impression there's about like 3 billion people left on Earth. Everyone else is being brought out into space, whoever can afford it, basically.
Well, there's more than 3 billion because it was going to say...
That was going to be the casualty rate or something.
That was the casualty count. More people were going to die after that, I think, because Earth was just being left to die because they were going to blow up that orbiting space station.
The factory.
Because it turns out, just to keep up with the story, like they thought that girl was an android. Turns out she was an actual real little girl. She had nanobots put in her by her scientist father to cure some whatever disease she had that was killing her. And it turns out that those nanobots that she had were essentially the secret to terraforming, because it helped things, whatever it was, whatever the science future magic was, that her special nanobots
control the nanobots.
Yeah, and she could use it to speed up the growth rate of living organisms, specifically plant life.
There's a really nice moment where they have like a tomato plant on their spacecraft.
Yeah.
And she's able to like speed up the growing of these tomatoes. And they have this funny scene where they're selling real tomatoes for like $1 a piece.
Yeah.
And I think that later in the movie, she's talking about the things she did, and she's like, I made $23 selling tomatoes. I thought that was really cute.
It's exactly the kind of thing like little kids would pick up on, and it's like, we made $23 selling tomatoes. It's like, it was like that.
Yeah.
I love you 3000 kind of moment, right? It was like, but anyway, in order to kind of maintain control, the only way to essentially kill these nanobots and this girl is with the fallout from a hydrogen bomb.
Because the nanobots can only be destroyed by super high heat that hydrogen bomb creates.
Or the krypton radiation.
The krypton radiation, yes.
Apparently we'll also do this. But essentially, like, the bad guy, the CEO of this corporation is essentially going to like capture the girl, put her on this orbiting space station with the hydrogen bomb, detonate the bomb, kill the girl, let the factory crash on Earth, kill billions, and then all the people that he wants, he's gonna take to Mars and start his new utopian society. It was refreshing to see again, like the corporations being the bad guys, because they are, and I think it's important in media to kind of reflect that. If you look at, not to be completely anti-corporate, not to completely dismiss the system that has given us so much, but like,
I mean, a big part of this movie is its criticism of capitalism, and it's pretty relevant to kind of what's going on, where we see the uber rich in our society being able to do whatever they want, right?
Yeah.
And in this case, it's like, it makes sense that if Earth had a disaster, well, the uber rich would just be able to take off and go do their own thing, leaving everyone else behind.
Yeah, I think it's especially prescient for the age we live in. You saw what happened with COVID-19, and you see what's happening now, where there's a growing divide between the rich and the poor. I think it's a very important kind of commentary to have, to kind of shine that light on the potential evils that corporate entities have, and that uber rich, when you start to have that such a great divide between the rich and the poor. I think it's important for our art to kind of represent and bring to light those issues. And even though this is a fun, lighthearted space adventure kind of movie,
mostly lighthearted,
mostly lighthearted, aside from some of those darker elements where one of our heroes was a brutal drug lord. But to shine light on those social issues and not shy away from them, and not back down due to other kind of corporate interests, like we've seen happen with other movies where they, specifically like the LGBTQ content, I think it's fair to say that a lot of that is because of the Chinese market, where bigger blockbusters have had to kind of temper their progression a little, or progressive kind of messaging, or critiques of different social structures, to give way to recoup, to maximize their profits essentially, and recoup the investment, right?
This is the thing, is that like our Western Hollywood created blockbusters are built with like $200 to $300 million budgets, and it takes so much money to make back any kind of profit.
Yeah.
That, I mean, I totally understand from a business sense, you have to accommodate as many people, as many viewers and ticket buyers as possible. And a big part of that is China. And they have these really awful human rights issues going on there, that our system panders to, and it's all just to get more money. And then you have a movie like this that apparently only cost $21 million, which is absolutely nothing. Like, that's nothing in our Hollywood world here. And it's like, they can take a lot more risks. And I love seeing that. It's like I'm used to seeing like $5 to $10 million horror movies with interesting takes in them, because they can afford to not reach everybody. This movie,
even if they make 20 million, is like, well, this is still, you're still making a profit, right? You don't have to be $1 billion to start to break even, right?
Exactly. And if this movie made $80 million at the box office, like, that's, again, seems really easy for a sci-fi movie that looks as good as this does. That would be nothing. And then Netflix, who knows, I mean, with their finances, how much this movie is going to make.
Yeah.
But for $20 million, that's got to be nothing for them too. That's just, it blows my mind. But it's so great that they get to actually put out the content that they want. Is like, obviously the filmmakers here had some things to say, some commentary to put into the movie, and they were able to without that overarching pressure of appeasing, these different issues and different audiences. I thought that was really neat.
Yeah, for sure. Like, a lot of the social commentary, which might have been dulled in other contexts, like I was really happy to see that there was a lot more depth to what on its surface I thought going in was just going to be a pure popcorn movie, and maybe it does still qualify as that, but to have those different layers of kind of social criticism, and also like all these flawed heroes who at the beginning of the movie were just in it for the money. They were willing to sell this little girl. They thought she was an android, but they were going to sell her back to who they thought was a terrorist organization. Yeah. Turns out that Black Foxes are an environmental organization who were being maligned by UTS, by this corporation, because they were, trying to use the same technology that had terraformed Mars to like help the people of Earth. Yeah. But they were willing to sell this android girl back to this, what they thought was a known terrorist organization that they were going to use to blow up something for like a couple $1,000,000.
That was a funny scene too, where he was on the phone, he had the voice changer going, and they were kind of negotiating. It's just like, okay, we want $2 million. Oh, wait, we can, if you want, we can go down to like 1.5 million. Like, he's talking himself down in money because they don't want to get too greedy. Like, $1 million here is absolutely like would change all their lives, right? Yeah. And of course the voice on the other line basically is just like, okay, $2 million. I'm not negotiating. It's just like, we just need this. We need this little android girl. Yeah. Now, one of the things that really got me when I was watching this was that back and forth between kind of that gnarly, like almost darkness of some of the backstory, and a lot of the events that are going on here, and then the immediate shift into the comedy and what you might say is lightheartedness, to a point where I made a note. It's like, this is slapstick comedy, followed about 30, 40 seconds after like a really gnarly, heavy scene just played out. And I found some slight issue in that, like, it was kind of that tonally inconsistent throughout the movie. In certain parts, like that kind of bothered me a little bit, but then they just had like a space chase and I'm just like, oh, I'm eating my popcorn. This is fine. Did you get a sense of that, like, when you're watching the movie? Like, how did you feel about the multiple fart jokes that happened in this film?
Well, I thought at the end it worked a bit better. Mm-hmm. I know what you meant, because listen, I think there's a way to balance out that humor and that darkness, and I think they did it pretty well. But you're right that it could have been those tonal shifts. Yeah. Could have been done a little bit better. They feel like it was really abrupt, where the like a couple of those moments weren't really given the chance to breathe. Like especially when he's talking about like the backstory, the actor's name, Song Joong Ki, who played Tao Ho. Some of his scenes where he was, this dude is legit, man. This guy can act. When he was showing him mourning the loss of his daughter and just him breaking down, and just like this is like A-list caliber acting you saw here. And then I think if that a couple of those scenes have been given just a bit more room to breathe instead of going right into the next kind of action beat or slapstick beat, is like a little bit more time for contemplation. I would have to agree with you there for sure.
I gotta say, like, there is a certain frenetic energy in this movie that I'm not sure is maybe like a cultural thing. Like maybe this, I haven't seen a lot of South Korean films, probably more South Korean horror movies, but especially like a sci-fi movie like this, it was moving very quickly at all times, almost to the point where I'm getting like kind of disoriented from what's going on. It was just like, and I think it was like there's no buffer between those heavy scenes and like the slapstick that I'm normally accustomed to in our Western movies. And this one, I mean, I can say this movie was 2 hours and 15 minutes long. And it was like that energy, it was just going nonstop. Like you're tired after watching this thing.
Yeah, I think mostly to the movie's benefit, it was like a freight train. It was like it would never let up.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there was a couple places where it could have been slowed down just a little bit or just edited a little bit to give it more time to breathe. But I think overall that what you described as that frenetic pace, I think it worked to the movie's advantage, where like it never felt like we were lingering too long on anything. It felt like the story kept moving along. We weren't getting bogged down. Even in all the world building stuff, it kept things like fairly tight, considering it was like, what was it, 2 hours and 15 minutes? It was,
yeah. It kind of felt like it was maybe too long, but at the same time, we got a lot of character beats and like character story in there that probably would have been sacrificed if it was any shorter. It was almost like they had to condense like a 3 hour movie down to 2 hour, 15 minutes or something. How did you feel about the main villain there, the Sullivan guy, the head of the UTS organization?
Again, I have to say that I was really surprised by the caliber of acting in this movie.
Really?
For example, I think Shin Godzilla is a good example of this, where there's that one character who comes in and she was supposedly I think worked in the White House. She was Asian background, worked in the White House. She came back. I think she was like supposedly fluent in English.
Yeah. I think I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. I think I've seen this crop up in several Asian films, whether Japanese films or Korean films, where you have people who are these Western characters, even played by white people, and that the dialogue, it sounds like it was translated from another language, and it didn't quite get a decent translator to actually have it sound like it was spoken by somebody who was fluent.
Yeah, it's something that we would really pick up on as mainly viewers of Western films. Like we're going to see this. I can only imagine in the opposite direction of like when we have a Western movie with like a South Korean actor show up. It's just like it must be laughable in some of those things. And what you're talking about,
100%. And it's interesting to come at it from the other side.
Yeah.
But I found that Space Sweepers English dialogue wasn't perfect, but I was surprised at how good it actually was in terms of just how it was written, in terms of the translation. I think it was a lot better than I've seen in other Asian productions or other, I always say foreign films, but it's only foreign. It's so weird to talk about foreign films as anything I'll say non-English maybe is a better term.
Yeah, I mean, it's foreign to us, basically.
But I think the actor who did Sullivan, I think did a pretty good job. I think he was a couple times he went over that line of like hamminess, but I think for the most part it was pretty good, and tonally it was on point for the movie, I think.
I might disagree. I thought he was the weakest part of the film. I felt like he was so over the top cartoony villain that it was just such he was a trope in the film, and I didn't like him at all. I gotta say, I mean,
it was probably good though. You're not supposed to like this guy.
You're not supposed to like him, but it's like I didn't like him because he was a compelling villain. I just didn't like this guy's presence on screen at all. I just didn't think it was that interesting. It was just kind of.
Oh, Well, I dug what he was putting down, man. I thought he did a good job with the material, and I think he could have gone to Nicolas Cage levels of craziness, but he played it pretty restrained. Where at the beginning it's like, oh, you could see this guy as like, oh, he's an idealistic but misguided, corporate businessman who's trying to advance human interests.
Yeah.
And then you slowly see the layers peel away. It's like, no, this guy is like this kind of almost like to the point of like eugenics level kind of thinking, where it's like, I'm going to kill most of the population to save the people who are quote unquote worthy. And you see that kind of, obviously this guy is a genocidal maniac, but I think there's an attempt made to give the villain a bit more depth that you don't always see in even some big budget movies. You don't see, but it's also kind of refreshing in a way. It's like, oh no, in the end he turns into a mustache twirling villain. It's like that. I'm 100%. Fine with that, man.
Yeah,
I'm fine with that.
I was reminded. I mean, we were talking about like Western actors in these Asian films, and I was reminded of Ip Man. When I watched all 4 of those last year, and it's like they would kind of alternate between like a British protagonist, a British antagonist, and some of their dialogue and acting was pretty iffy, and I was, and as much as I didn't like this Sullivan character, like the what was going on with him on screen, I think he was a step up from what I've seen in some of these other movies here. At the very least.
A good example is have you seen Squid Games?
Yes, definitely.
Right. So you remember the episode I'm talking about where they had the Western dudes come in to watch the final episode of Squid Games, and like it wasn't as bad as that. Like that was like almost to the point where it's like those guys almost broke the show. They were like getting so bad. Like the writing and the acting was just like, no, why do you? They'll just like cut back to the Squid Games. Get away from these guys now.
Yeah.
Like it wasn't as bad as the white guys in Squid Games, but it wasn't. Yeah, it wasn't Shakespeare either.
What are some of the other elements of the movie that kind of popped out? Were there any like specific scenes or interesting? Like there was some decent world building going on here that I'm interested in. Like, did you get anything else out of different scenes from this?
Well, in terms of like the ending, I was really surprised how emotionally invested I was at the end, where it was revealed that in the final getaway, it's like, it broke down some tropes. It was like, we're gonna go disable the bomb. Right. Yeah, and it's like, get there and it's like, actually, like, no, we can't, I can't get into if I just try to disable this, it's going to go off. It's like, oh, we can't disable the bomb. So what they do is like, they trick the villain and they take the bomb and they keep the girl, because they have to get the bomb essentially 5,000 kilometers away from the girl, or else the radiation will kill the nanobots in her, which will be a death sentence for her, but also a death sentence for terraforming, because they need the nanobots, whatever it is, the nanobots in her mutated so that they're able, she's essentially the key to terraforming. This little girl is literally the key to saving the future of humankind. And it turns out like he's chasing, like there's a big chase at the end between the crew of the Victory and was it Sullivan there? He gets in a spaceship and he's chasing them. And he thinks, he's like, I need the girl back. We need to destroy those nanobots to make sure nobody else can terraform and give us full power. And he pulls open the back of their space hole and is like, nope, it's the hydrogen bomb staring him in the face. And then you realize, and it flashes back, and it's like, no, these guys were on a suicide mission. They were like willing to it went full circle from like, we're willing to sell this girl back to a terrorist organization so they blow her up for a couple $1 million to, we're going to sacrifice our lives to save billions of people. And then you realize like all their dialogue at the end, like building up to that, is like when they're saying is like, oh, I'm happy to have been working with you, or it's like, it's been an honor and all this stuff. And it's like, man, it's like, what are they building up to? And it's like, and then the bomb goes off and it's like, I was surprised how emotionally invested I was in that scene. And like my heart kind of sank a little bit. I was like, no, they killed them all off. It felt like it wasn't a cop-out per se at the end when like the little girl, because we find out earlier in the movie,
it's not like a Deus Ex Machina that comes in. There's not some like we understand she controls nanobots. Earlier in the film, they go through a nanobot like space debris field, and the nanobots are like covering their ship already, and be like, oh my goodness, they have to abandon
eat through the hull, right?
They're going to eat through the hull. And it's like these nanobots can do a lot of stuff. And the little girl basically repulses them because she has control over them. It takes a lot out of her to do that, but that was set up earlier in the film. Yeah,
it was set up earlier in the film, and so like even from 5,000 kilometers away, she's able to control the nanobots to essentially create this like Groot-like safe, like essentially this force field. Not Groot-like, I guess, because he was like branches, but like essentially like this force field of this cloud of nanobots.
The nanobots could do anything. If they want to take a form of branches out in space, by all means, they could do that.
Yeah. But I am Groot's them to safety, and they get back. But yeah, it was like,
I thought they were going to kill. I thought they were going to be dead. Honestly, I didn't see that little twist come at the end. I mean, it's not a twist.
I did not,
but
and I was just like,
it would have been satisfying if they had all died in that, dying to protect her.
Sick bastard.
Well, you know what I mean, right? It's just like they saved
Kill them all.
I mean, they saved the girl and they saved the planet, right? Save the cheerleader, save the world.
Exactly. But no, I was pleasantly surprised at how emotionally invested that the movie had gotten me without even me really knowing it, right? It's like because normally in a movie like that, I'd be like, oh yeah, I'm like, yeah, they're going to sacrifice themselves, whatever. But this time I was like, no, I wanted to see Bubs get her skin grafts, and she's not going to get that now. But she does.
I got to say, some of the things I really liked is the space sweepers, and there were like different like derelict crews that we got. Like we had a Canadian, like a French Canadian one in there at one point.
Oh yeah, I saw the Canadian flag. I was like, yeah.
It's just like, it was neat seeing the different nations being represented up in space, but they all come together at the end. But the one thing I liked is that none of the ships had a bunch of cannons and guns on them, because they're being chased in this finale, and all they have are their tools, and they have these harpoons. And the harpoon system was pretty neat. It kind of reminded me of that anime you had me watch there, Attack on Titan, I think.
Attack on Titan.
Yeah, where it's just like, especially Bubs the android, it's very common.
Oh, I see. Yeah,
like she's running around, like jumping from ship to ship. They're traveling at like 5 miles per second in space, and she's harpooning and jumping to different ship. I thought that was pretty neat. Like visually, it was a feast. It was pretty neat. And at the end, they're all harpooning. They're using these giant claws and stuff that they have on their ships to take out these little fighters. It was pretty neat. I really enjoyed that. That
was a nice little touch where it's like, I was worried for a second that I was just going to get into like a Star Wars-esque shoot 'em up at the end, but it was like, no, these are really just like glorified, like private contracted trash collectors. It's like, no, we don't. It's like essentially like the citizen kind of uprising. Like you have like a foreign invasion, and you're just like, you rise up with whatever you have. You have a dump truck. It's like, I'm just going to go ram into your tank with the dump truck and do as much damage as I can. It's like, you use the tools you have available. And it felt like, almost like a, local kind of like more of like a resistance as opposed to like a full-fledged military or militia, and just like showing up is like, no, what our real weapon is like the courage to stand up and do what's right. And we're going to, doesn't matter what tools we have, we're going to use whatever tools we can, but it's like just that courage to be there and to like unite. After you saw like how the crews were essentially pitted against each other from an economic standpoint, is like, and the crew of the Victory has apparently had a reputation for being really good at collecting space junk, also a reputation for not handling their money well. And like everybody hated them at the beginning. It's like when they stole they were all after this one kind of derelict ship, and like this Victory swoops in and steals it from a bunch of people. But at the end, you realize is like, even though we have these minor disagreements, is like, you know what? When it push comes to shove, when it's, like us versus them, when it's like evil corporations sending their drones out and their plan is to kill billions of people, to keep people oppressed. Yeah. And then it's like, well, no, we're going to stand, even though we haven't seen eye to eye all the time. We maybe don't even like each other that much, except for the French Canadian guy who's kept making passes at the captain there. But no, it's like, when the push comes to shove, we're going to stand together for what's right and like fight with whatever weapons we have. It's like, it was a pretty kind of compelling, kind of touching moment.
Well, it was a nice way to have like huge stakes. Like there's a lot at stake in the movie without the world being like in imminent danger. Like obviously, if this bomb goes off, like, and this factory crashes in the earth, they say like 3 billion are going to die. But it's like, there's so much more going on with being able to re-terraform Earth was like the bigger goal, right?
Yeah.
That was essentially the kind of more important, is to have this little girl alive at the end. But it was that all these other people would possibly die for it, and they're basically all willing to go for it. It was neat. It was neat that they come together. When you were talking about that initial scene, like they were pulling off absolutely bonkers moves, driving in and out of these like different like space structures. It's like, yeah, this crew has the skills. It was pretty neat to see.
Yeah, I love, like, there was the space elevator kind of concept. It reminded me a little bit of in the Total Recall remake that
yes,
whatever the transport is called in that, where like it kind of goes around the world.
Yeah.
But it's like very kind of similar idea, except like space elevator obviously goes up into space.
A big beam of light that they go up.
Well, it's like it's a structure, like the donut-like structure around the light. Like the light is almost like a guiding laser or something.
Yeah.
But it's like, yeah, there was like a lot of neat technology that they didn't feel the need to go, oh, we don't have to explain every little bit. It's like, it was very much, it felt like a lived in world. And it felt like, oh yeah, this technology all fit together super well. Whereas like, oh yeah, it's like, of course they would have magnetic boots is like just like, yeah, it makes sense. Like you're living in space. It's like if your artificial gravity goes down, or if you have to do repairs outside, it's like, yeah, like just like little things like that.
Well, especially like in their vehicle, like their spacecraft, it didn't feel like it was just all touchscreens and stuff. Like there was switches and control panels everywhere. It's like piloting one of these things is not going to be super easy, but it's going to be very hands-on. It's just,
I love that it was super tactile. Like in the pilot seat, you saw it was like the foot pedals and like the hand controls. Looked like a step up from the aviation technology that we have today. So it's like, okay, this kind of, it's not that big a leap, right? Or there's an internal logic in the movie for the technology that kind of made sense.
So with all that being said, where does your rating? As you know, or as our listeners may or may not know, we rate everything on Letterboxd. It's a 5-star scale with a possible heart, a like option on that, which could be a 6-star or just respect for the movie. Where does Space Sweepers land on the star beater for you?
I think this was above average. It really surprised me. I think I'd have to go with 3.5 out of 5. It was really
respectable,
really, really solid. I don't know, like after all the talk about how great it was, it feels kind of weird to only give it a 3.5. But there was
I thought you were going to go a bit higher.
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of a spark that could have taken this. It was on the edge for me between a 3.5 and a 4, but it just didn't quite hit that 4-star mark for me. It was a really good movie. I would recommend this movie to people. In terms of like, I've been really disappointed with Netflix originals in general and Amazon Prime originals, and most streaming service originals are kind of, they feel almost like a made for TV kind of quality, or it seems like a quality gap. And this one escapes the orbit of that for the most part. It feels like an actual full-on production. It feels like an actual real movie that you'd see on a big screen. And I just wish that in terms of some of, like you said, I think looking at it now, some of the pacing issues were like giving some of those character beats just a little bit more time to breathe, and maybe going into that social commentary a little bit more with the world would have elevated this to be from good/great to great/awesome.
For myself, I'm basically landed at 3 stars out of 5 on this one.
Okay.
I was kind of iffy when I was watching it because I did kind of struggle with some of the tone of the movie and the pacing.
Fair enough.
The main villain was like too cartoony for me to really process properly. But by the end of the movie, I was really into it. I was like really invested in all these characters and their journey. And yeah, now talking about it, it definitely should not be under 3 stars. And I would recommend it. Like this is a good, fun movie. And I think it's kind of refreshing watching, quote unquote, foreign cinema. And like, can I even call this big budget foreign movie? Because I
would say it's big budget. Right? Well, for us, 21.2 million is a lot of money.
Yeah.
For a Hollywood blockbuster, it's like a drop in the, like you look at, the typical Marvel movie or typical DC movie or typical, Fast and Furious movie, probably. It's like, this is a $20 million, like probably a tenth of their budget, right? Like it's nothing.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. There's been a string of movies over the past few years that are $200+ million that are supposed to be our big tentpole films that are just, they're kind of feeling tired and lackluster, like they're a little bit disappointed. And I think maybe having a different cultural perspective on, a space adventure like this is very refreshing. And it's like, I want to see more of this stuff. And I think it's important that all of us go out and see different movies from different perspectives like this, from different cultures and different filmmakers. And It's just like we really get sidelined or siloed into watching kind of like almost like cookie cutter stuff. It's like this worked, so we're going to apply it to this other movie, and all of a sudden all our summer big blockbuster movies all look and feel the same.
Yeah, no, I definitely get that same sense of like, it was refreshing just to see is like, this is a completely different perspective on filmmaking. And like literally there's a whole world of filmmaking out there that I think we kind of get, especially in North America. That Hollywood machine kind of narrows our vision, or we get those blinders on. And it's always great to, take those blinders off, to, go down these different avenues and explore different filmmaking from different filmmakers from different cultures and different communities and different countries. Listen, this is not the next Star Wars, but it's really refreshing just to see a different style of like, in terms of storytelling, but in terms of like the visuals, you can see like the shot composition is different, in terms of like how many cuts, and just like being able to follow the action, which is probably a lesson that some of our North American filmmakers could take here. Where it's like, it was pretty easy. There was crazy action going on, but it was really easy to follow it. But yeah, it's always great to see those different perspectives, and yeah, just like open, like sometimes I feel like watching stuff like this, and then I'm going to go out and look for more, maybe I'll go on a South Korean kick and look for more films. But like, I feel like sometimes there's a whole world of movies that we kind of are missing out on because we're so obsessed with like the North American, next big Marvel or Disney film that's coming out, right?
Well, there's something to be said as well about being able to get these movies. I mean, especially we're growing up, we're limited to a lot of video rental stores and whatever's shown on TV. And now with streaming, especially services like Netflix that are producing movies all over the world for all their markets, and then giving it to us on the service. It's like this was released worldwide, presumably at the same day on Netflix. And it's like, we can finally be able to easily just stream these movies that wouldn't normally be accessible to us.
Yeah, honestly, for all my criticism of Netflix and other streaming services, I have to give credit where credit is due. And content like Space Sweepers, content like Squid Games, which normally wouldn't have been, like you and I kind of being in that movie world, we probably would have heard about that and watched that kind of stuff. But like Netflix and other streaming services like this have given more opportunities for a wider range of films from a wider range of cultures to be consumed by kind of more general, wider audiences that normally would have been, in North America at least, kind of more niche, more like, we're in that community. So we know, like you and I, would watch Akira, or we watch Battle Royale, or we watch Brotherhood of the Wolf. But you talk to your average moviegoer and they would have never heard of these films to begin with, right? Where now it's like, Squid Games or Space Sweepers or Parasite is all of a sudden is like, have these wider releases to more general audiences. And I think that's a great thing where you're sharing these perspectives, you're sharing these, different cultures, and giving more people more opportunity to see this greater variety of content. That's not content. I hate using content to describe this. This greater variety of art and artistic expression that's out there. And I think it's good for the filmmakers, but it's also good for audiences too, to get that diversity both on the screen, but also kind of behind the screen in the storytelling itself, right?
And it was nice, like this movie had that multiculturalism built into it. Like it was an important part of the film. Yeah. Some of my final thoughts on Space Sweepers is that it scratched that itch for the sci-fi. Like what I mentioned, looking for a movie to talk about on the podcast, I'm feeling sci-fi and I'm going through some Netflix stuff. And there's so much of that like slow moving kind of atmospheric sci-fi that's really, it's just, I think kind of a little bit easier to produce with like a lower budget. It was really refreshing to get like a space adventure that just went all in and just wasn't, it was something different. It definitely scratched that itch. You have anything else to add before we wrap this up?
No, I think we pretty much covered it. I think Space Sweepers was a pleasantly surprising, pleasantly refreshing movie to watch, especially for North American audiences. I don't think it was necessarily genre defining or genre changing, but it was a really well made film, really well told story, really great characters, and I would definitely recommend this to people to watch. If you just want like a really fun action adventure movie to watch, go check out Space Sweepers.
That's a wrap on another episode of the Real Film Chronicles podcast. Thank you for listening and hanging out with us today. We really appreciate your support and look forward to you joining us for the next episode. We can be found around the internet and social media, with our home base being realfilmchronicles.com, which will have all the links you need to follow and keep in touch with us. Until next time, take care of yourself and others, and keep your film journey going.